Hi, welcome to episode 242 of The Corner of Knit and Tea. My name is Laura. I'm also known as Fluffy K on Ravelry, Fluffy Kira on Instagram and Twitter. I blog at thecornerofknitandtea.com, and that's where this episode and every episode show notes will be. I have an Etsy shop called The Corner of Knit and Tea, where I sell my handspun yarns. And we have a Ravelry group called The Corner of Knit and Tea. If you haven't come and joined us, I hope you will. Hi, how are you? It is Monday, August 19th. And everyone around has gone back to school, and I am not quite feeling the pull of fall yet, I think, because I still have a few more things to get done, but we are inching closer, and I'm pretty sure that at any moment I'm going to have my burst of fall inspiration. There comes a point almost every August where all I want to do is drop everything and knit sweaters. And I'm going to have a little trouble doing that this year, at least if I want to knit for myself, because I have so many other projects that I need to be doing. But I can start the kid sweater shortly, so there's that. And fall to me is always the beginning of knitting season. Because I knit when it's getting cooler and then when it's cold all through winter. I mean, I do knit year round, but in the fall everybody comes up with great new sweater patterns, and there are all kinds of inspiring things happening, and there's crafting for the holidays if you do that, and so I'm getting excited for that. I'm not trying to wish time away, but it's weird because it was just June and July that we celebrated the coming of summer, and so it feels a little weird, especially since technically we won't be in fall until late September, but I just feel the coming of the seasons and things changing. So I hope you have had a lovely week and weekend. Last week was busy for me. I made a lot of progress in, I am knitting a sample that I can't show you, but I am to the seaming now, and then I just have a collar and some blocking, and it will be done and gone, and I can turn my attention to things that I can show you. So that is kind of momentous for me. I'm also working on my shawl. I'm working on some spinning. I just have a variety of things going on to talk to you about. So I hope you are having a lovely day. It is Monday afternoon. It is about 4:30. I had hoped to podcast a little earlier, but I was actually waiting for something to dry so that I could show you. So let's get started. This week I am drinking the Republic of Tea Hibiscus Sangria. It is supposed to be an iced herb tea, but it was just one packet of it. You can buy it in iced tea size, I believe, which is like a big packet destined to make a pitcher. But this was just one little tea sachet. It was something that came in the catalog, so I went ahead and threw it in my Stonehenge mug. Oh, it looks like I might have dribbled a little bit because I can see some. I put it in my Stonehenge mug, which has sheep from Stonehenge from when I was in the UK, and that is Hibiscus Sangria. It is an herbal tea, and I added just a touch of sweetness to it. Ooh, that is really good. Yeah, there's like a little dribble of tea in the corner of my tray here that I'll have to clean up when we're done. Anyway, so that is today's tea. Let's talk about the knits. I have a finished knit to show you. This is the, the Coffee Bean Cardigan by Elizabeth Smith. I had it and then I didn't have it. It is a worsted weight cardigan. It comes in 3 sizes. It's, I believe, like 3 months, 6 months, and either 9 months or a year. I think 9 to 12 months. Anyway, I knit the middle size for a baby of a former coworker. She had a little boy, and I wanted to knit a little something, but because he was born at the very beginning of August, and because I knew he was going to be an August baby, I decided to size up and knit the 6-month size, because I wanted it to fit him winter, fall, winter, and into 2020. And so I knit it hoping that it would be a little big, in November, December, and then would fit in January, February. So this is my finished sweater. It came out super cute. And so I used Ella Rae Classic Superwash Wool. I have the tag here. It was in blue and pea soup. Those are the colorways. And I used most of the blue and probably about half of the pea soup. And so that is, they come in 220 yard skeins, I believe. Let me just look. 219 yards. So yeah, so I used probably about 310-ish yards. did I do that right? 220 and 110, 330 yards. So about 330 yards for the 6-month size, possibly a little more, a little less. I haven't weighed it yet. And it knit up super quick. I literally did the top while I was sick and got to where I split for the sleeves, finished the body, did each sleeve, and then the only thing that took me a little extra was button bands, just because I didn't really get to them super fast. And I ordered the most adorable buttons. I don't know if you follow Hello Yarn. Hello Yarn teamed up with Yarn Bee, who is Vera, and they produced some cute little buttons. They come in these little kind of rice paper packages with the little brad to keep them closed, and they do all kinds. They did small sizes and larger sizes. Larger sizes are close to an inch. Smaller sizes, I think, are closer to half an inch. They had woodland creatures. They had mushrooms, and they had these cute little ones that look like little rounds of trees. They called them tree cookies, and that's what I used. I'm trying to see if I can I'll show you. There are actually rings on the they look like little subsections of trees, like they've got rings cut in them, but I thought they were super cute buttons. And then I was also going to talk about, so a lot of people use the yarn that you knit with to sew buttons onto a cardigan. And sometimes I like to do that if I can use the yarn, as in if the holes in the buttons are big enough and I can get the needle through. And sometimes that requires just kind of pulling the plies apart of the yarn and using one ply or whatnot. Sometimes I just resort to needle and thread because the buttons are too small really to use yarn for them. And so I have, this little sewing kit. It's funny, it's in a pink tackle box. And it's in a pink tackle box because my grandmother put together a sewing kit for me when I was probably 10. And I'm 41 now. My grandmother has actually been gone for almost 20 years. I can't believe it's been that long, but next year it will be 20 years. And so she put together these little sewing kits for me and my sister. And they're called Lady Angler tackle boxes. And they're pink. And one of the things that she put in that box these many years ago, and I'm talking about this because this actually has a point, is she put like a thread sampler kit, which was all these tiny little spools of thread that look like this. And they're about, I don't know, probably 10 to 15 yards of thread. I mean, not much at all. But I still have like a million of them because she basically, I want to say they were like 40 or 50 in the kit. And of course, half of them are gone these days, but I still have half of them. And so when I went into my sewing box to find my needle and thread, as I do, I went looking through my minis. And of course, I had a mini that basically matched my sweater pretty well. So thank you, Grandma. For all these years later, she is the one that taught me to knit. And it just reminded me of her today. And I thought how funny it is that 40 years later, I am still using. You can tell I'm not a seamstress. I do not do very much. Pretty much I sew buttons back on. And so that's what I use these tiny little spools for. So I put together my sweater. Again, this is Little Coffee Bean by Elizabeth Smith. I knitted it on size 7 and 8 needles. The yarn is LRA Classic Superwash, and it is in blue and pea soup. And what I actually did with this is I washed it in the sink with Eucalan, and then I went ahead and threw it in the dryer. And I was waiting for it to dry, and I decided to do that because this is a non-knitting friend, and so I assume she is going to throw her sweater in the washer and the dryer, and so I wanted to go ahead and pre-test that for her, because if anything's going to happen to it, the yarn is marked superwash. I believe it does suggest that you hand wash and dry on there, as most yarns do. Yeah, it suggests you, it says machine wash is okay. It suggests you not dry it. But it is machine washable pure virgin wool, and I expect that she's going to wash it and dry it because she has a baby, and babies are messy. So I went ahead and did that, and it looks great. It's a little bit fuzzy, but the other thing is that when you wash superwash to block it, it grows a lot, and sticking it in the dryer snugged it back up. So it is ready to go. I just need to purchase a card this weekend, and then I will pack this up and send this off. But it was a cute, quick knit, and I am super pleased with it. And the pattern is delightful. It is super easy, and I may actually be adapting it to knit for my niece and nephew this year. And I bought more tree cookie buttons because I figured their sweaters will have them as well. So that is a finished object for this week. Which brings me to what's next on my needles, my shawl. And again, it is still kind of a wadded up mass on my needles because that's how these things go. It is a crescent shawl, and it starts out with a section of orange. And then it moves into these kind of wedges where I am doing short row shaping with a lighter orange. So the yarns that I am using are Monostil Uruguay Alma, which is a new yarn from them, and it is 100% merino superwash. It is a fingering weight single that comes in 546 yards to the skein. I'm using the colorways Inspiration and Mercy. Mercy is the dark orange, Inspiration is the light orange, or kind of the melon color, and I am digging these colors. I am almost done with the second wedge. I had kind of hoped there would be 3, but I don't think that I have enough left to actually do a third wedge. So I think I'm probably just going to end up going into my edging after this, and it's going to be a section of the dark orange edging, and then a pinstripe of the, I'm kind of mocking the pinstripe that I did here in the orange, so it will be a pinstripe of the light color and then more of the dark orange. And my plan is to almost use up this skein. I plan to try and keep about 10 grams in reserve to account for people's different knitting gauges so that no one will run out if they work on this pattern. Yeah. So, and I thought I would talk a little bit about the fact that, like, I thought I'd have 3 wedges and I'm not going to, as a little bit of my design process. I had a comment in a thread on Ravelry that's called Ask Me Anything a few weeks ago, and then the poster deleted it, and so I don't know exactly why the poster deleted it, but I'll go ahead and talk about it anyway. The person asked what inspires my designs and how do I go about designing. So, I only design when inspired, which is not as often as you might think. I don't think I'm the best designer because I'm not as creative as I might like to be. And I don't think that I get lots of big, great ideas that look different from other people's patterns. Honestly, the way I am most creative in the design process is that often when knitting someone else's pattern, I will decide to make a change, which is artistic in its own right, but is not a pattern of my own making. So I will tell you when I've made changes or decided to do things differently, but in general, I don't start on a pattern from scratch. I also feel like I see a ton of inspiration around me from other designers, and I'm wary of not wanting to copy them. I mean, I realize at some level knitting is knitting and there isn't anything super new to be done, but I'm also wary of like everything that I do is iterative because I take techniques and designs that I have already worked with and then work them out again. So that is a little bit about my design process. In the case of this shawl, I'm informed by different things. Sometimes I am informed by yarn that I really want to turn into a pattern. Sometimes I am informed by something that I see that I think inspires a pattern design, and then I go looking for yarn. Sometimes I get asked to make patterns. So various things kind of get me started down the design path. In this case, I am reviewing these 2 yarns for Monostil Uruguay, and I was also asked if I wanted to design a pattern for one of my clients. And since I had kind of both going at the same time, I decided to combine the 2. So I will be reviewing this yarn by the end of the month for Monostil Uruguay, and I am working on a pattern. In this case, the yarn informed the pattern. I had the 2 yarn colors, and I started to think about what I might want to do with them. And they reminded me a lot of summer, and I decided that I wanted to do a somewhat simple shawl, and I have been really inspired by I'll just discuss a few of my inspirations: Vera Velmaki's shawls, Stephen West's shawls, and playing with crescents and short row shaping and kind of wedges and all kinds of things. I have used none of their patterns to work on my pattern, but I have knit patterns that sort of have some of the shaping in mind and some of the techniques that I'm using in there. So in that case, I would say that it is definitely, I don't want to say derivative, but it is definitely built off of things that I have knit and already know. So, but I did a little drawing before I started of what I wanted the shawl to look like, with the little orange bit in the center and then the sections. And I couldn't decide whether I thought it looked kind of like a sunray or like sections of an orange, sort of, with the lighter colored flesh. And, well, I guess normally it would be the lighter colored rind and the darker colored flesh, but I just couldn't decide exactly what I thought these looked like. And so I've been referring to it as sections of the orange, but I don't actually really know what I'm going to call this pattern yet. So, the point that I also wanted to make was, so I thought I wanted to do 3 wedges, but I don't think I'm going to have enough yarn for 3 wedges. I have already knit this and ripped it out once, and I could knit it and rip it out again and try and work the short rows differently so that I would have enough yarn left for the 3rd section. But I ultimately decided that I'm going to leave it where it is, and I'm going to adapt my design as I go, and I think I will still be pretty happy with it when I finish. So that's kind of the way this shawl is coming together. I'm showing this to you because I'm working on it right now, and I think it's kind of interesting. There's a lot of discussion about whether designers should share as they're working, or if the knowledge is sort of proprietary and part of what you would pay for in a pattern. As it turns out, this pattern will be offered for free through a client, so I feel like I'm talking about it. It's not a big problem. I may put it up for sale when it is after it has completed its run with the client. Basically, it's going to be a sign up for the email newsletter to get a free pattern. And so once it is done there, I may decide to sell it on Ravelry. I haven't decided yet, but this is what I'm working on. So my hope is actually, now that I am done with that other sample, that this week I'm going to jam on this and basically almost finish it. I need to write it up. I need to send it to the tech editor, and my hope is that it will be available starting early to mid-September. So I really got to jam on this week. And so yeah. So, but the rows are getting really, really long. I don't even know how many stitches I have right now because I haven't counted lately, but it's a lot. So that is what I'm working on with my Mono Still Uruguay Alma yarn. And like I said, next week, hopefully I will have more information for you, or a pretty darn close to finished shawl. So that is the big thing that I'm working on. If I have a little bit of a chance this week, I'm not sure that I will. It may have to make one more week. I need to cast on for the hat design that I am doing in September. And that is with my friend Treasure Goddess Christine's yarn. It is her Treasured Warmth Worsted Weight, which is a superwash merino, and it is in the colorway Swimming with the Fishes, which is a beautiful bright blue. I actually have selected a stitch pattern and cast on numbers for that. I have not started knitting it yet, and the other thing that I need to think about is how I want to do the decreases around the crown. So in that case, just to discuss my design process there, basically I was asked to do a small object for another one of our clients, and I decided a hat would be perfect, and I wanted to tie it in with Hat Not Hate, which is Lion Brand's campaign against anti-bullying. And so I decided that I would design a hat in a beautiful blue yarn. And so, like I said, I went through, I picked a stitch pattern. Basically, I went through my stitch dictionaries and picked a stitch pattern that I liked, and figured out some cast on numbers. And now all that remains is for me to knit it and then experiment with the decreases and see what I like. So that is kind of what's going on with the knitting. Let's talk to you about a few other things. Let me take a sip of tea. Last weekend, so not this just past one, but the one before, I talked to you about my dyeing adventures. I went to a friend's house and dyed yarn in her, she has a little dye studio / photo darkroom, and I showed you the sock blank, but I couldn't show you the other yarn that I dyed at the time because it hadn't come back to me yet. I dyed it in the crock pot, and so we were waiting for it to cool, and I had to leave before it was cooled, so my friend generously agreed to rinse it for me and then bring it to me, and she brought it to me Wednesday this week. So you have not seen this yet. These are 3 skeins of Knit Picks. It was basically a fingering weight yarn. It's 100% merino, but it is not superwash. So originally I thought maybe I would dye it up and use it for baby blankets or baby knits. But because it is not superwash, I decided that I think I'm going to use it for a cardigan for myself, because I generally don't knit in non-superwash to give away to other people. I decided that I wanted to crockpot dye it in the hopes of getting sort of a semi-solid to knit with, and I wanted to get a like deep plummy purple. And so rather than using purple, she has purple dye, but I find that sometimes the purple, something in it chemically breaks. It causes the dye to separate a little bit, and so sections look a little bit different. And so I decided to mix red and blue. And the colors that I used, I'm not sure which dyes she used. I don't know whether she uses Dharma Trading Company or Jacquard dyes. The two colors that I mixed were Brilliant Blue and Cherry Red. And so I was hoping for something really dark. In the crock pot, it looked almost reddish black. And so I came out with, let me show you kind of the most representative skein. So I think this skein is mostly what I was looking for. You can see it's plummy purple, and actually you can see bits where the blue and the red hit slightly differently. Like this section here is much more red, and this section up here is much more blue. You can also see a few small sections where the yarn got very, very blue, or even has little bits of white in it. And so my two of the three skeins came out pretty well and pretty evenly, although they still have some of those light sections on them. And basically what I think this is I have not done a ton of dyeing, and so I put all my yarn in the crock pot and I poured the dye in, and then I kind of swished it a little bit, but I didn't do kind of a big stir. And my friend said that the other thing that I probably should have done while I was dyeing was to put like one skein in the bottom and pour a bunch of dye in, and then put another skein on top of it and then pour more dye in, and then put the third skein in and pour more dye on top, so that I would more evenly coated these. So as you can see, there is some variation in the skeins, and I think this was probably the skein on bottom that got the least treatment. As you can see, there are some bright white sections in there. So this is what I came up with, and I actually really dig it. When she called me to tell me that I had white spots on my skeins, and I was like, oh, because I had remembered seeing that like dark red black, and I was thinking it was all one solid color except for the white spots. But it's really not, because the dye broke in interesting ways. And so I haven't quite decided. I could take these back and put them in another crock pot of dye, or I could knit with them as is. And I'm sort of tempted to knit with them as is. It would be kind of a little bit of a crazy cardigan. I have about 1,200 yards of yarn here, and so my thought was that I would do a super simple cardigan, and what I would do is I would alternate skeins. I would actually work all 3 balls at once, so that every third row would get a little bit of this in it, and that would help keep those bright white spots that didn't take any dye, and put them in various places throughout the sweater. So I haven't entirely decided yet. I did post a photo on Instagram and asked, and most people suggested leaving them as is. As I said, these two are fine, but this one I haven't 100% decided yet. But that is the yarn that I dyed, and tips from my dyeing if you want to crockpot dye. I am by no means an expert. I've only done it a few times, and as you can see, still have some work to go on learning how to dye yarn. So let's move on to spinning. Last week I was working on a braid called Happy Happy Thank You, which was in honor of Hello Yarn's 10th anniversary. It was a Falkland braid, and it had some icy blue bits, some swampy green bits, and then some browns and purples. And I finished that, and that is here. It looks beautiful. I have not done finished measurements on it. I should have done that before I started today, but it came out really, really nice. Lots of fall tones, every so often just a little bit of a blip of that icy blue. And this one is going to be going up in the shop, so if you think this interests you, keep an eye out on Instagram. I will probably measure it when I'm done here, take some photos, and get it up in the shop this evening. So that is oh, and I also have some news about my Etsy shop. I went ahead and adjusted everything to free shipping in the United States. So if you purchase a skein of yarn, it is now free in the United States. I did not actually adjust my prices up, so it is kind of a deal. Make of it what you will. I do still need to charge for international shipping. To be honest, I'm not even charging full price for international shipping. I'm basically eating a few dollars, like usually anywhere between $2 and $4 on international shipping. So just so you know, you are not bearing the cost alone, but unfortunately I can't set that at free at this time. So this one will be up in the shop if you have any interest. That brings me to what I'm spinning this week. Last week I showed you some beautiful bats. They are by a fiber company that is no longer in business, at least as far as I can tell, Dripping Fiber Studios. And these are Merino, Superwash Merino, Polworth, and Sparkle bats. They were called Girl on Fire. They're drum-carded bats, and they were after the Hunger Games, so that tells you how long these have been sitting in my stash. So I will count these as using stash, and they are beautiful. They are red and orange, and there is Angelina in there, just the right amount, and there's purples and burgundies, and they are beautiful layered bats. I didn't know until I opened them up what they look like, so I will show you. There is orange and yellow and red and kind of a dark purple, and also, well, maybe not in this one, well, maybe a little bit, there's like a pinky purple there. I don't know if you can see that. Anyway, they are spinning up beautifully. They are spinning up kind of mottled looking, like tweedy almost. I am tearing them into strips and spinning them, but I am not really separating by colors, so they're just kind of all spinning together. It's a really interesting spin. It's not my normal spin, but I will be spinning that up into a 2-ply, and that will also go in the shop. So if those are your colors and you think you might like to knit with them, I will bring you something to look at next week. My hope is to finish those this week. So I think that's all the news that's fit to print for today. I hope that you have enjoyed this. I appreciate that you have chosen to spend a little time with me, and I would love to hear what you're working on, or if you have been bitten by the fall knitting bug yet. Like I said, I'm not quite there yet, but I hope to be soon. And I will say, as I always do, happy knitting, happy spinning, happy sipping, and I'll see you next time. Bye!